What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm Jeremy Versillo. Joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing on this spooky Tuesday evening?
Getting spooked by a one and only mysterious person called Thomas Harley, who somehow is a defenseman for the Dallas Stars that my opponent in Cacuffle picked up literally on midnight on Monday switch around. So I'm like, I should probably know this person because someone stayed up that late to pick them up. I'll be honest, I didn't, but I should know them because they got a goal and a couple of blocks. Seemed to be pretty interesting in helping them have a lead against me so far.
Yeah, Thomas Harley is a prospect defenseman for Dallas who is making his full-time debut this year and has some pretty good upside, but unfortunate opponent to be facing this week. Well, let's jump right into things. Why don't you tell us the big injury news from last night?
Well, it's as much as we know because it's the Anaheim Ducks and they don't tell us anything, or at least the beat writers that are there don't have this scoop. But what we all saw is that Gibson left the game with a injury. I believe it was an upper body injury. Someone remarked it could have been the back, but we don't have any conclusive evidence of what it is. And then Lukas Dostal, who has been doing basically 50-50 split, if not exactly, came in and had a gem of a game. So right now we're sitting with not really any update. So we'll have to wait and see what it is. But Dostal's been playing well. And he's almost been playing well enough that you might be interested in him on the 50-50 split. I would be interested in picking him up depending on how your goalies are in your league. If he ends up getting everything, that's great. And then if he's not, he's worth a stream at least maybe for a game or two to see what happens.
I agree with you. If Dostal starts getting everything, he's a great option. Actually, real quick, I apologize for the sound in my background. There's construction going on behind me, so you're definitely going to hear this, and there's nothing I can do about it. Lukas Dostal is honestly probably better than John Gibson at this point, but the team's going to play the guy who's making the money. He had, I think, 32 saves in 2 periods yesterday, and, I would love a goalie like that if he's getting every start. In a 50-50, it's probably not worth it. But at the very least, if you picked him up already or are going to pick him up when you hear this, he should get the start Wednesday. And if Gibson is injured for a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, then you get some great value. We also had 2 other injuries in the Florida game. Oliver Ekman-Larsson took a nasty elbow to the head from Charlie McAvoy, who's been suspended for 4 games. That's another thing we'll touch on in a minute. And Sam Bennett left shortly after returning to play hockey for the first time this year. I did not see any potential injury lengths on any of those. I'm sure OEL is just concussed, and that could be anywhere from not missing a game to a couple weeks. Bennett, I hope it's not re-aggravating a previous injury because that could be a while. Do you have any further info on those?
Right now, it's a wait and see. The people listening to this podcast might know by now because they said the team announced that they're going to say something Tuesday. We still haven't heard anything, so hopefully we'll find out something soon. The Bennett injury, at least live, I'm no doctor, didn't look so hot, so it could be something long-term. And then I'm with you on the shade with OEL. Hopefully it's nothing serious, but we'll have to wait and see on the news. The interesting thing, though, is that while we know how they're going to play without Bennett because they haven't had Bennett for a while, during the game without OEL, they actually had, for the ensuing power play, they had 5 forwards. They had Barkov, Reinhart, Rodriguez, Tkachuk, and Lundell. So if you're thinking that, hey, this is Forsling's time to rise, or maybe somehow a different defenseman was going to come and play, it looks like we'll have to see the length, and with practices, things can change. It could be a situation where we have a 5-forward power play.
I'm just going to pump my Mike Riley call from a couple weeks ago, and if he gets 1 power play, 1 opportunity this year, I am counting that as a win. Real quick, I also mentioned that Charlie McAvoy is suspended for 4 games, so you will be missing him the rest of this week and the beginning of next week. Not much to do there. If he can go in your IR in some leagues, do it. Just a bad hit, and he got a deserved punishment. Do you have anything to add, James?
We'll have to wait and see with the actual power play Dolman is coming out. They also don't have Grzelcyk. So right now, at least they didn't have a power play once McAvoy got hurt. But for power play 2, they had Kevin Shattenkirk and Hampus Lindholm playing. So potentially one of them could slide in, or hell, maybe they do a 5 power play setup because or a 5 forward setup, because I'll be honest, I wouldn't be hanging my hat as a team on a Shattenkirk or Lindholm as a power play 1 quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, those guys would be worth a pickup if they get it, but the Bruins play Tuesday, Saturday, Monday, Thursday, so it's not even like you're getting a good schedule. There's a chance you can't even fit them into your lineup. Next up, we're going to have our fun little Halloween trick-or-treat segment. This is essentially Sustainable or Fleeting disguised as a Halloween episode. I'm going to list some guys who I believe the criteria I used was outside of the top 150 in Cupful ADP, but currently inside the top 50 in Yahoo rankings for points. And we're going to talk about whether or not these players are going to be a treat to have in your lineup for the rest of the season, or they're just playing a trick on you. The first one of these players is Ryan Hartman. Ryan Hartman is currently ranked 28th overall, despite being drafted 177th in the Cupful. We did see last year what he could do with some good deployment, and now it looks like he's keeping that. Is this for real? Obviously, I don't expect him to be a top 30 player the whole season, but is he someone you're just going to hold on and ride and see a top 100, top 75 type player?
Oh, yeah, I think that he's going to be a season-long hold. He was someone I was trying to target into my drafts because he did have that right-wing eligibility as well, not just a straight center. However, I didn't end up getting him in any league. So with that line 1 with Kaprizov, I'm always going to be interested in that. But something to keep in mind, he is ranked 28 overall. But if you look at his points totals, he had, I believe it was 50% or more than 50% of all of his goals and assists in a single game. So while I won't complain with getting all those points in that one game in a probably 1 year week, it is something to keep in mind. So while he is a season-long hold, in my opinion, he might be worth, I'm never the greatest trader, but maybe a fish out and see if you can get something. And then in the end, just ask for the world or try to do something where if they say no, you're fine. Because in the end, if you can't trade him, I'd be perfectly fine having him in my roster. And if you can upgrade him into someone that you're more confident with, even better.
He does have a 24% shooting percentage right now, although the 2.8 shots per game looks great. He's not on power play 1, which he never was in the past. So yeah, I think he's a great sell high if anybody's going to fall for that. I wouldn't get your hopes up, though. The next guy, though, maybe is a buy high or hold high. What do you think of Brock Boeser?
I'm in the same boat here with, as I was with Hartman, basically. I see as, unless anything changes significantly, and I don't believe anything will change significantly, because the big thing is that people are talking about Mikheyev changing things for Boeser, but the nice thing is Mikheyev is with Pettersson, which leaves Boeser with JT Miller, so yeah, it's going to have the even strength. Now, if anything changes with the power play, that's going to be where the scary part is, but as of now, I'm a fan, and he is shooting, so even though he hasn't had a point in his last few games, he's still going to give you enough of a floor there, and with the JT Miller exposure and the power play exposure, he's going to be a hold. But the issue is with him, is that I could say the same thing about trading, but he had such a horrendous year prior that I would be surprised even if he was still on the hot streak, if anyone else would be willing to give anything too much. So just ride with them and see how it goes, is my opinion.
Ironically, Brock Boeser also has a 24% shooting percentage, just like Ryan Hartman. Obviously, that's not sustainable, but I agree with you. The power play time is a major uptick from the last 2 years and back in line with what Boeser had when he was a relevant fantasy asset. And the Canucks are kind of gaining some steam as a team that might be a surprise that's here to stay. If you listen to the PDO cast, they had a recent episode on Quinn Hughes and what he's been doing to help his team in real life this year. So keep an eye on those Canucks. They could be sneaky good this year. One more guy before we go to our ad break. Bryan Rust. Shams, Bryan Rust is no longer on Power Play 1 for Pittsburgh. Is that correct? Or have they changed that?
Feels like they're changing it every time. As of this moment, he is not on Power Play 1. It's kind of been bouncing around between Riley Smith and Raquel.
I am not really interested in Bryan Rust when he's not on that top power play. Pittsburgh is an aging team. They're actually in the bottom of the Metropolitan Division right now. Do you have any different opinion there or any reason for optimism with older than 30 Bryan Rust on a very old Penguins team?
So the nice thing to keep in mind is that while all of his points so far have been on even strength, and he's with good even strength line mates, I am with you, is that I was joking on the Discord that we were all worried about the Capitals falling apart because they were old and not going to be like themselves again. But with the last few games, should we actually been more worried about Pittsburgh? So I'm with you, is that if you can get anything, I would be a little bit more forceful, trying to sell high on Rust and then maybe even try to get something equal. But this is going to be the one where I believe could easily turn into a trick.
I agree with you. The shots on goal from Rust have been really nice this year. He's shooting 3.2 times per game, but he only has 3 hits in 9 games, and that's from a guy who you could expect 60 to 80. Last year he had 98 hits in 81 games. That hurts his fantasy value too in most types of leagues that we play in. With that, let's go to a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. The next trick-or-treater that's visiting our Short Shift's house tonight is one William Karlsson in Vegas. William Karlsson hasn't really been a great fantasy asset since that inaugural Vegas season, which was now 6 years ago, or 7 years ago. He had 78 points that year, but now he's on a 90-point pace through 10 games. He's not really shooting any less than he used to. He's converting a bit higher, but that's not really his game anyway. He's still on Power Play 2. He's not playing with Eichel and Marchessault. Is this a renaissance, or is this just a trick?
This is the biggest trick of all tricks. If you would be a fan of a line 3, yes, line 3, because he's not with either Stone, which is line 2 with Stevenson, and he's not with Eichel or Marchessault. So he's not even with the Misfits line because neither of them are there. So he's with, I believe it's Eichel Caro, or I blank it out. No, that's actually, I don't even remember the names of the players because they're just kind of not to be mean, but the second rate of the offense on that team. It's, if you know it, congratulations, because I can't say it off the top of my head. So this is the biggest sell if you can get anything, but keep in mind, I would be fine with riding him out depending on deeper leagues because he is a nice find that you probably just got off the waiver wire to get the points while they come. But I would not be surprised if this ends the next game and doesn't come back for a week or two.
Karlsson is a frustrating own like that. I also want to point out that with the loss of Riley Smith and the addition of Jack Eichel, Vegas is now running a stronger Power Play 1 than they have many of the previous years. For a while, they used to have a 1A, 1B where Stevenson and Stone and Pacioretty back in the day were one, and the Misfit line was another, and then Pietrangelo and Theodore split time. But now they're running a true 70+% Power Play 1 that William Karlsson is not a part of. So, you said he was the biggest trick of this episode. I actually think this next guy is the biggest trick of the episode. There's a guy I actually just skipped over. Frank Vatrano is currently 7th overall in Cupful scoring, mostly thanks to the fact that he has 9 goals in 9 games. Frank Vatrano does this every year, where I think if your league counts hat tricks, you may want him, because He scores in bunches. He's had 2 of them this year. He's shooting almost 30% overall. He's not on power play 1. He's on a bad Ducks team. He's not playing with Karlsson or Zegras or Terry. Is there any reason I should be excited about Frank Vatrano?
Okay, this will sound mean, but when I said the biggest trick, because I was kind of giving it that people should know that Vatrano is probably not to the level of the 7th, but I will hold you to this, is that I can't believe I'm saying this, because I was with you with the start of the season. I was actually actively avoiding Duck players. I actually have 2 on my couple team, and I see them as long-term holds. I feel like this is actually a half-decent top 6. It's that even though he's not with, say, Zegras or Terry, I believe that McTavish is another, now obviously not to their level, a player of worth as well. And while he's not setting the world on fire, Ryan Strome is a decent player that is like at least above replacement. So if you have those 2 and him, I feel like that is a half-decent second line that you're not going to be able to sell high on Vatrano because everyone is thinking the exact same thing you are. So unless you have like a new guy in the league that you just want to try to punk him and get everyone else in the league mad at you because you got convinced him to trade, this is just going to be, as we said earlier, this is going to be a wave that you can ride. It's going to fall apart, but I don't think it'll fall down to 0 because I think he has enough supporting cast that maybe he might hang around with you on your team if you're in a deep league, but nice to have these points now.
I do see your point that this trick is so projected and so obvious that there's not anything you can really do. Yeah, we're telling you that Vatrano isn't going to maintain his pace, but you can't really sell him high. I doubt anybody's going to bite on that. If they do, send us screenshots because I would love to see what you can get for him. Up next, we have a 4-pack of Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina, I almost didn't put these guys on here because Carolina's been, just as a team, unreasonably hot so far this year. Actually, they haven't even been hot. They've just been involved in dynamic, high-scoring games, similar to the 2010 through 2014 Washington Capitals, where everything is a 10-goal game between the 2 teams. So, hopefully you don't own any of their goalies, but Seth Jarvis, Teuvo Teravainen, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Jaccob Slavin. Are any of these guys treats, or are they all just riding the wave of, a good team with a lot of goals so far?
So this is going to be a little bit of a cop-out, but I think it's really going to depend on how Svechnikov gets deployed, because he's still getting the quote-unquote 4th line and then sprinkled out, so we don't have the full picture. So I think the idea is that I would be interested in any of the top 6 on this team, because the nice thing is that while Aho is obviously the best center, is that they play their top 9, honestly, or maybe even all pretty evenly, that as long as you can get some good players on your team, and I believe the top 6 has nice people from your Kotkaniemi to your Teravainens. So if you have any of those players, I would ride it and then have the special bonus for the power play 1 and then take those people. Now, the thing that I'll be 100% clear on is that this happens time and time again. Slavin is a drop. It's because I am the fan of this because I run on low defensive players on my points leagues, is that you're going to get your players that have high ice time and they're just going to follow the points because they're always on the ice. But the idea is that they're not really the ones that develop the points, so it comes and goes. Because, like, for example, he hasn't had more than 2 cupful points in the last 4 games, so he's below replacement or even half replacement of a player already. So he's the clear cut. And then for the forwards, I'd be interested in the top 6. And then if you want to be a little bit more greedy, whoever ends up on power play 1, whichever one you want to call that.
I actually think that one of these 4 players is a treat regardless of if he's on power play 1 or not. And that is Seth Jarvis. I am pretty confident that Seth Jarvis will maintain the first line deployment, even when Svechnikov gets bumped up there. I think he's shooting more than enough to be fantasy relevant. 28 shots in 10 games. He's playing over 19 minutes a game, which is getting into Sebastian Aho territory. I don't have the full lineup in front of me, but I kind of suspect that's the second most on the team. And I think there's a good chance he keeps power play 1, because they could also bump Necas or Teravainen off that power play and keep Jarvis, who is their up-and-coming, dynamic, potential superstar. I would be interested, honestly, in buying Seth Jarvis if somebody thinks that he's about to lose deployment and is willing to sell him for, a Hartman, a Vatrano, a guy like that. On the other hand, Teuvo Teravainen has 8 goals and a 40% shooting percentage. That's obviously not staying. I almost lost to him last week in a league, so I wasn't happy about that. Kotkaniemi is kind of getting third-ish line deployment. I think he's a good player, but I just don't know if he's going to be helpful in fantasy this year. And I totally agree with you on Jaccob Slavin. This happens every year, specifically with Slavin, where because he's playing lots of minutes, he'll randomly get 5 points in 4 games once, and everybody's like, oh, this is the breakout. And it's not a breakout, it's just a defensive defenseman playing a lot of minutes. Marc-Edouard Vlasic used to do the same thing back when San Jose was a powerhouse. 2 more guys to power through here. First up, we have a defenseman. Why don't you tell us a bit about Travis Sanheim, Shams?
Sanheim is a person that I thought was a trick early on and regrettably haven't picked him up, but I think he might actually be a treat. And this is just going to be the situation is that, unlike Slavin, where Sanheim is actually being put into a lot of even strike situation, he is getting significant power play time as well. So while obviously I don't think he's going to be the 52nd overall player, which he is now, is that he's going to be put in position to succeed. And also, we all joke about how Tortorella is a wild cannon and can do anything. He's actually said praise for Sanheim time and time again. So at least he, as of this moment, is in his good graces. So I would be of the mind that unless you're getting something interesting from him, like from trade offers or whatnot, this is going to be a nice find of a defenseman that I would be willing to ride now and see where Philly as a general takes him.
I think you're kind of right. He's a hold for now. I have less optimism than you that he's going to maintain this relevance, especially once Rasmus Ristolainen returns. But the power play time and just the 24, 25 minutes, up to 28 some nights, has been a real revelation. Right now, he's definitely their D1. I don't think Cam York or Igor Zamula are quite ready to take on the big duties. It's actually really just Ristolainen I'm concerned about. If Risto comes back and Sanheim is still the top defenseman on the team in deployment, then I'm going to be a bit more interested. In general, though, his peripherals are good enough that you can hold on and wait and see, and you're not going to be tempted to drop him through the bad times, I don't think. Last but not least, do you know who the number 1 goalie in cupful scoring is right now, Shams? You probably do because it's on the Trello, but who is it?
It's Johansson. And I'll be honest, I was about to say, if it wasn't for that sheet, I was going to say someone else. So this is the kind of treat with a caveat, is that everyone, it's kind of like the Vatrano, but in a better situation, is that everyone knows that once Vasilevsky is healthy, he's going to have the net. Now, maybe Johansson might get sprinkled in a little bit more than, your Elliots and whoever in the past, but not enough to be rostered. But the problem is everyone else knows that. So unless you get the most desperate of desperate people, you are not going to get the value that he's bringing to you at this very moment in a trade. That I would say that just ride it out, be happy, win your weeks now, and then just be keeping it in the back of your mind that maybe you might have to, once you hear a little bit more about Vasilevsky, maybe try to pick up a random goalie's streams or whatnot at that time to think about where you find your next guy. Because unless you're going to get someone that is desperate, you're not going to get the value that Johansson's going to bring to you now with a trade, most likely.
I agree with you. I think you almost have to hold. Johansson may get the most volume of any goalie for the first half, because Tampa's backup is currently Matt Tompkins, who is somebody I did not know who he was before the start of the season, and I play some pretty deep dynasty leagues. The other interesting thing is Tampa's actually given up a ton of shots this year. Johansson has a 52-shot game, a 43-shot game, a 41-shot game. He did give up 4 and 5 goals in all of those, but those are still pretty good fantasy scores when you're just making that many saves, given our league scoring settings. So maybe if you're in a categories league, the save percentage and goals against average might make you a bit sick to the stomach, but if you're just looking for saves and wins and points in a points league, it's pretty good to have Jonas Johansson. And I'm almost wondering if he's still playing well in early December when Vasilevsky comes back, they may ease Vasilevsky in and kind of go 50-50 for a week or two, just because it is a back injury and you want to be careful with those, especially if you have Stanley Cup final aspirations. So yeah, I wouldn't try to buy Johansson because his time of relevance is limited. But if you have him or if he hits your waiver wire, don't be afraid to pick him up, despite the fact that that one Buffalo beat writer said he's the worst goalie he's ever seen like 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's a wave to ride, and I would be riding it. I'm kicking myself that I think he went as like the third last pick in my division, and that was when people knew Vasilevsky was out. But if I had him, I'm with you. I would be holding on to him until they say that Vasilevsky is playing every game.
Well, that's all we've got time for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK, as well as Bryan and Elon at Keeping Karlsson. I also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, at Game Day News NHL, and at Game Day Stats NHL, all organized nicely at the site www.gamedaytweets.com. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to do our research with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, ShiftChart.com, Icy Data, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and John Reed is our digital media producer. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.